Hi, my name is Dane, as you probably know, and this is going to be a video about my journey, what I've done with my business over the last couple of years, and where it's been. So basically, where it's been, where it's going, and what I'm considering doing next in my life. This video is probably going to be a long, rambling video. I apologize already for that. I wanted to do this as a live video just to force myself to do it. But YouTube is not letting me do a live video yet. I don't have enough subscribers. So hopefully I get enough so that I can start doing some live videos. So yeah, this is going to be a long rambling video. I've essentially got 5 bullet points that I want to talk about. And for, yeah, so we'll see how this goes. All right, so the first one is to talk about, I want to tell you about Touch Dreams. So Touch Dreams, as you probably know, is the business that I started a couple of years ago when and that I've obviously been running for the last couple of years. And it's my business. I started it when I graduated from university 11 years ago. And it has been it's with the exception of perhaps the first couple of months, it has been the same thing all 11 years. And yeah, it's been remarkably similar, with the exception of a point in time, which I'll tell you about just now, where it was kind of 2 businesses in one. But we'll get back to that. So Touch Dreams is a website agency, and it has always been, just about always been. And what that means is we make, we design and we build websites. Now, when I first started, obviously I started by myself. Essentially, I started doing, when I graduated and I decided to start the business, I was doing graphic design, essentially. And I was kind of doing it as a hobby. And so I decided to offer it to local businesses as a business. I thought that let me start my own business doing what was at the time my hobby. So I was doing like logos and business cards and letterheads, literally like print media. And very little digital media, actually. Although I had done computer science at school and computer science at university. So I decided to do graphic design for a couple of months, offering my services. I would literally walk around my area, which is Muizenberg, near where I lived. There were a couple of small businesses, and I walked into each one and I said, hey, my name's Dane. I am doing, design. I can do a logo for you if you need, or business cards or letterheads, that kind of thing. And I got a couple of clients, and very quickly, I apologize for the ambulance in the background if you can hear it. Very quickly, people started asking me to do websites, and considering that I'd already had a background in computer science, it kind of made sense for me to make websites. Also, it sounded really exciting. Like, I could teach myself how to make a website. There was so many, videos and books and just so many ways to learn how to make websites. And so it kind of combined graphic design with the computer science programming, essentially, that I had learned. So it was quite a natural thing. I taught myself how to do it, how to make websites, and the first ones were awful. If you can somehow find the designs of like A1 Service Center, which is one of the first ones I did, or the one that we didn't launch, but I was going to do a website for one of my best friend's parents' company that imported fluffy, I wouldn't call them toys, but they were imported like fluffy animals. I think they were like novelty items, almost like tour. Anyway, it was a website for them, for their business, for these imported fluffy animals, like wild animals. And the website was so awful. The design was so awful. I didn't really know what I was doing. I'm pretty sure the first couple of sites I built were all custom, like HTML, CSS, JavaScript. There was very little, bigger software that I was using, like frameworks. This was before I'd even learned how to build sites in Drupal. It didn't take very long before I realized that I wanted a content management system, because I wanted my clients to be able to log in and edit their own stuff on their sites. So I looked at what was out there. I looked at WordPress and Drupal and Joomla and, some other frameworks. This was kind of before JavaScript frameworks became big. And so I looked at those CMSs, and I definitely like Drupal the best. I tried them all out, but Drupal definitely seemed to be the best, so in my opinion. So I went with that, learned it quite well, and I started offering it to clients. And yeah, that was what I did for a couple of years. TouchStreams was me designing and building at first really awful, but then better and better websites, mostly in Drupal. And I would attend a lot of events, Drupal events like meetups and Drupal camps in Cape Town. And I went to one in Joburg and I spoke at that one. And I spoke at a lot of these meetups and I got a lot of connections through that. I got to meet and make friends with people from other Drupal agencies in Cape Town and in Joburg and throughout South Africa, really. And so it opened up quite a few doors, just meeting people, being willing to speak, I think gave a lot of people a bit of respect for me. And because I was quite, I put a lot of time and effort into practicing what I was speaking about at the Drupal camps. And so I think I got some respect from other people in the industry, and that allowed me to, it turned into some strategic partnerships, which is really fantastic. All right, so next step in the journey, I apologize. I've been a little bit sick this week. So I'm going to have to blow my nose now and again. But I'm going to keep this running because I need to tell you the whole story. All right. So next part of the story, I can't remember what came next, but I think the next part was when I partnered with a close friend from university, Urania. If you're watching this and listening to this, hi. It was a good time. We didn't partner for very long, but I respected you a lot, and I hope you respected me a lot. And we gave it a shot at running a business together. You were doing copywriting and some like strategy, and I was doing the technical side and the design and the technical side. And we got 1 or 2 clients, and we had some potential, but then I think we both agreed that it wasn't really going to work, especially for you. It just didn't make sense for you to be in that business, that you had other opportunities that were way better for you. I wanted to keep going with this, so I kept going with TouchStreams. And then after about, I don't remember exactly, but I think it was about 3 to 4 years in, I hired my first employee, which was Mark, who was great. Mark was stuck with me for a long time as a business, as an employee in TouchStreams. And he got better and better over the years that he was working with me, like really good. He outpaced the growth of the business itself, and then he obviously left to other ventures, as all of my early employees did. So Mark was a great first employee, and then soon after I had a couple of others. There was Ashraf and Lukman and Lawrence and a couple of other guys. I remember all of you guys, but I can't name you all here because there were a lot of different people at different times for different amounts of working for me for different amounts of time. And also the sort of admin people that I had working for me as well. I remember you all, and it was great to have you help me make TouchStreams a success. Anyway, so TouchStreams, as a team, we went up and down in terms of number of employees. And I think just as a plain old website agency, our peak, if I say up until about 5 years ago, our peak was, I think, around 4 or 5 team members, at which there was a point at which I think it was maybe 6 of us even. It was Mark, Lawrence, Ashraf, Lukman, Melanie, I think at the time, and Terry as well for a period. And so I think there might have been 6 of us up to a peak, or 7 even, but they were all at different times potentially. Okay, so TouchStreams went up and down in terms of employees. We've constantly over that time grown in terms of actual, like, what we offer, like the quality of the sites that we offer, and I guess our ambitions. But we've always stuck to kind of designing and making websites. Our fee, our pricing has always gone up and up, but it's always been very, very, I think, modest. To the point where now I wouldn't call it modest anymore. I think now it's quite fair, our pricing. We're somewhere, we're not at the top of the market, top end of the market, but we're not at the bottom, definitely not at the bottom either. But when I started, I remember making websites for the first couple of websites. I probably did for like 2,000, maybe 3,000 Rand for the entire website, which would still take me several days or a week or more. And I was very happy with that amount of money for a website. Apologies, there we go. The computer just turned off. So that was TouchStreams as a website agency. It's probably a lot more to tell about that story. We've had some interesting clients. I've learned a lot. I've made a lot of mistakes. One I can remember, a key mistake I can remember that I made. You remember the mistakes that you made where, especially I remember the mistakes I made where people would fight with me over an invoice, what I was charging them, and often, almost every time that's ever happened is because there's been a miscommunication. Effectively, what I thought I could charge, I thought it was okay for me to charge that and send them an invoice for something. I hadn't communicated that that's how much I would be charging them. So I remember, for instance, I was doing some work for Signature Design, a small design agency, and I don't remember what the project was. It was some sort of website I was doing for them, for one of their clients. And I remember that I started the project, I gave a quote at the start of the project, and then the project ended up being a lot more work than I anticipated, roughly double the amount of work. So at the end of the project, because I had quoted, at the end of the project, I invoiced for roughly double what I originally quoted for. And the owner of the business quite rightly said, what on earth are you doing? Like, you can't just, out of the blue, invoice us for twice as much as you quoted, which is fair, I guess. I mean, on the one hand, there's different ways to look at it, right? On the one hand, I had actually done that work. I wasn't invoicing for something that I hadn't done. It was, in a way, it was just, charging for what I had done. But on the other hand, I hadn't communicated it at all. So it was not right for me to just invoice for something I'd never said how much, I was always, I've always thought about, like, from a perspective of other industries, like in the contractor building industry. If they give a quote, I mean, the building industry is quite notorious for giving quotes and then never sticking to them. And budgets are always way more than what the original quote is, because building, I don't know why, but apparently always ends up like that. So I thought that's how it can be. You quote one amount, and if you end up working more or need more money because of what went into the project, then you just invoice for more at the end of the day. But I've learned that is feasible only if you're communicating very thoroughly along the process of the project. So the client knows long ahead of time that things are going out of scope. So, I learned. And you make mistakes and then you learn. And I think one of the reasons why our current clients really love us, and we're quite busy, is because of transparency and honesty. I've always been completely honest with all of our clients. I've always said, I've never charged something that felt like I was making money off them because I could. I've never ever tried to make money out of a client, more money out of a client than was fair, just because I could. So I think all of our, and we've always worked hard. I've always worked incredibly hard to deliver something that's good, something that lives up to my standards and would live up to anyone's standards. And I think a lot of other people don't do that necessarily. They'll deliver what will get passed rather than what they know is actually good. So, wow, the number of times that we've inherited websites from other agencies that have made the sites, and they have been absolutely atrocious in the back end. So it's happened so many times where we've gotten a website, most often WordPress websites, but it's not specific to WordPress, of course, it applies to everything. You get this project, and I'm sure this applies to many industries. You get something from another agency that's made it, and it looks fine. It actually looks good when you look at it from a visitor's perspective, but as soon as you go into the code and the way it's structured, it's so badly done that any changes mess up the site. It's so fragile. And that is just such a bad way to do work. It's like, imagine building a building and it looks great from the outside. Maybe even it looks great from the inside. But as soon as you push on a wall and the wall collapses because it looked great, but they cut all the corners, like, that is horrific, and it should never be allowed, obviously, in the building industry, and shouldn't be allowed in our industry. But a lot of agencies do that. As long as the final product looks right, then the client is satisfied, or the client doesn't know any better, and the agency is satisfied with what they delivered. Anyway, that's enough to talk about TouchStreams as an agency. Let me tell you about what happened next. So, I don't remember how many years into the business, but it was about 3 years before COVID. I think that's a valid way to describe things these days. Like, was it, things relative to COVID-19, the start of 2020. So 3 years before, roughly, maybe it was a bit more, before the start of 2020, I had thought of a business idea that you probably know of right now, which we call Touch Dreams Team Knowledge, which I figured was something that was really sorely needed. And it was related to websites, because essentially where it came out of was for our website agency, I started taking quite a bit of notes and keeping track of the snippets of code and other things that I wanted to remember, but not like in a document format. I wanted it to be all kind of connected, kind of like a site, like a wiki almost. And I looked at the software out there, and there was a lot of different ones, but one that I really liked was Google Sites. It just worked really, really nicely. This was after the Google Sites revamp, not the original Google Sites, which was awful. It was like the V2, which actually looked nice, had really nice editing tools, and it was really simple, and it allowed us to do a really nice, allowed me to make a really nice internal site for our agency where we could store a lot of information, and it had pages that were connected to each other, but it was simple, And I figured, thinking about it, and I was, at this time, I was doing business coaching with Kathy Clark at the time, and with a couple of other business friends, like Megan. And business coaching was great. And Kathy was a fantastic coach. And I had met so many other businesses and spoken to so many other businesses through the business coaching at the meetup sessions in person, and talked to them about what I was doing with capturing our sort of internal knowledge and making sure that if I'm handing something off to a team member, then I've written it down and documented it and so on first. And I figured a lot of other businesses are probably not doing that. And a lot of them, and a lot of business coaches, including Kathy, would talk about things like systems and documenting things in standard operating procedures. And I figured that's kind of important, to be able to pass knowledge from one employee to another, so you don't lose it when employees, come and go. The knowledge stays even as team members come and go. It's particularly important for any position where the team member, it's not a pre-trained position. Like I'm going to use an example, and I hope this is a valid example. In something like a profession like accounting, students can get trained in university for that, and they can come out of university maybe not being a very experienced accountant, maybe not being very, they don't have the experience and the skill yet, but they've got the basics, right? And you can take somebody who's studied accounting, or maybe the same could apply for a lawyer in a very junior position. Could take somebody who's studied and put them in a position and just give them the work and say, this is our process, here's the software we use, go, do the thing. Certain other types of jobs that aren't professions, you can't really do that for. In my industry, making websites, I've always had to spend months and months and months, and sometimes years, teaching people how to make websites the way that we do. Because there are colleges and courses and so on, but there's no, most people who apply to be developers with us, either they have very little skills or none, or they, those that do have skills, their skills in web development is completely different from what we actually do for our clients. So I inevitably always have to train our developers. And if I'm going to go through that process with them, might as well document what they learn, and how we do things, and turn that into, systems. And I figured most other businesses are probably not doing that. And from speaking to them, that was the case. So I figured this was something that was needed. Businesses needed their systems and their internal team knowledge to be captured. I pitched the idea to a lot of people, obviously, getting their feedback, people that were biased. So in all honesty, I should have known better not to ask close friends and family, but I did ask family and friends, and they all said, yeah, it sounds like kind of a good idea. It sounds like it could be useful, to varying degrees. Friends and family who worked in businesses that had tried to capture their, team knowledge in some sort of note-taking, documentation, internal systems. Like Hilton, for example, in his company at the time, I think he was working for Takealot. He said, yeah, this would be really valuable and really needed. Of course, I couldn't just walk into Takealot and offer to do it for them when I hadn't even started the business and we didn't have a proven process. And anyway, a lot of people said, some people said that it sounded like a kind of good idea, but they didn't really know. A lot of people expressed the idea that they weren't sure what the business case was of it. So, was it going to be a good idea? Would it make money? The way I think I remember pitching it to Megan, who has always been for a very long time, my sort of most trusted and respected friend in business. And I think if you're watching this, Megan, I think you said that, it sounds like a great idea, but how's that going to turn into a good business, like a profitable business? Because nobody's doing it, and if nobody's doing it, why not? Like, when nobody's doing a certain business, there's two reasons. One, because no one's thought of it. Well, there's a couple of possibilities. One, nobody's thought of it. Very unlikely in a world of 8 billion people. Number two, people have thought about it, but nobody's tried it seriously because it could be because of it takes a massive amount of cost or effort or something upfront that prevents, like barriers to entry. Or it could be that people have tried it, legitimately tried it. People have actually put it, given their shot at that particular business idea, and it hasn't worked out for them. It could have been any of those reasons. I figured that that it was maybe a combination of all of the above. Okay, to be fair, it wasn't the middle reason. It wasn't about barriers to entry, because capturing team knowledge requires pretty much nothing. It doesn't require anything but a way to take notes and then a way to, communicate those notes, ideally through digital or printed means, to your clients once you've finished. Anyway, so I figured it was a good idea, and I started to offer it, suggest it to other businesses. I think I did a couple for free to start off with. So I spent a day with Megan and her sister's business, the Harp business, capturing their knowledge. And it was a sort of trial run, of course. And I don't know what happened with that. I never really followed up properly with it. I did it for a small accounting firm, also for no charge. And I did it for another accounting firm, or another, I don't know. I did it for a couple of 3 businesses for no charge, seeing how it would go, what the process would be like, and most importantly, what would it be like interviewing other other employees of this business, because sure, the business owners might think it's a good idea. Cool, capture my team's knowledge so that it's, stays there. Great idea. But what would the employees think of it? Would they be receptive? Would they answer questions? A lot of people, when I sort of told them about this, a lot of people were very concerned that people wouldn't want to talk. That was one of the biggest concerns, actually, in hindsight, of a lot of people. When I told them about this idea, they said, a lot of people are not going to want to tell you what they know, because by holding on to that knowledge, they have power, essentially. I mean, they didn't use those words, but your value. So a lot of people think that their value, that if you know everything of how they do their job, then they're no longer valuable and they can be fired at any time. And I sort of see where that's coming from, but in my trials of this, that was so far from the truth. Even the people who were quite protective over their jobs and were concerned about their own knowledge, they would start the interviews a little bit sort of clammed up and not wanting to talk much. But by 20 minutes in, half an hour into the interview, everyone was talking, because people can't help telling you what they know, because it feels so good. Because in telling somebody like me how you do what you do and what you do, you're just proving that you can do things. And even if they're not thinking about that, it just feels like them demonstrating their value. So subconsciously. So even people who didn't want to start talking to us, they just end up telling us things. Oh yeah, I did this and I do that, and I do it this way and I do that. Even if what they were telling us wasn't the highest quality of information, and we still had to dig a lot deeper, still people would almost inevitably want to tell us, want to talk. And I say us because while it started with me, I did bring on one or two other people in the business. So the main person that I brought on that was with me for a long time was Daniel. Daniel was a fantastic sort of business partner in it. Daniel is smart and very motivated and savvy, although at this point, Daniel, I think you're still quite early in your business career, so I'm sure you're going to get a hell of a lot more savvy still. And Daniel had different ideas sometimes of the way it should be done, a little different from me, but good ideas, you know. I wasn't necessarily always right. And so between Daniel and I, we saw this as an opportunity. We saw this as this could go somewhere. This could really go far. Nobody else was doing this. And so we gave it a shot and we pitched it to a lot of other businesses, and we had a bunch of growing bigger and bigger businesses interested in it. We did it for a larger accounting firm, then we did it for OMS, which was a sort of shipping services provider, maritime services provider. Then we did it for I think our last biggest client was Kilowatt AV, which had at the time I think around 80 to 100 employees. And that was a fantastic experience. I wasn't very involved in it, unfortunately, because I was still running the website agency and that was taking a lot of my time. I was quite involved in, when Daniel came on, he took on more and more of the Team Knowledge business the more time we spent together. And I ended up spending more and more time doing the website agency, partly because the website, TouchStreams as a website agency was still making money. Not a lot of money. We've never been really profitable, like hugely profitable, but it was making enough money that it could subsidize the Team Knowledge business. So it allowed me to actually hire Daniel in the first place. And the Team Knowledge business, while we were getting bigger and bigger clients, we weren't really profitable. The money could just, because those payouts from those projects, the Team Knowledge projects, were far in between. They weren't big and they were far in between. We were towards the end of running TouchStreams Team Knowledge. We were in conversations with an even bigger company that was very keen on bringing us on board. They had well over 100 employees, maybe a few hundred employees, I can't remember. And I probably can't really talk about that, but they were very keen. It just never worked out. There were a few others as well, which I'm not mentioning, that were interested, that we spoke to, that were potentially going to sign on and help get us to do their Team Knowledge. And then we had one or two other employees as well in the Team Knowledge business. But essentially, TouchStreams became two things. Became the website agency on the one side and TouchStreams Team Knowledge on the other. So, as you've probably gathered from my tone and how I've been describing it, that came to an end, the Team Knowledge side of TouchStreams. I really wanted it to keep going. But a few months before COVID hit, really, Daniel left because, well, for good reasons. He was going to continue his studies and then he was going to start his own business, and, great. Good for you, and you needed to do that. TouchStreams wasn't growing as fast as we had hoped, although it was growing. And I think we both agreed that we needed to kind of restart. If we were going to do this, probably we needed to restart, or I needed to restart it at some point. And I was not able to dedicate the time I wanted to it because I was still running the website agency. So we both figured, like, if this was going to happen, like, I would need to figure out a way to make a lot more time available for TouchStreams Team Knowledge. And Daniel's off to do other things. So TouchStreams Team Knowledge closed down, and then COVID hit, start of 2020, and So interestingly, at around the same time, I also let my whole website's agency team go. I figured what I was going to do is, I don't remember the scenario. I think one of my team members resigned. He got an offer at another agency. And I figured, it's been so hard, such hard work. And it's time that I dedicate myself to restarting either the website agency or Team Knowledge. And so I let the whole team go. And I was on my own, and then COVID hit. So it was pretty perfect timing, actually, because then when COVID hit, I was not having to deal with a whole team with limited, work coming in. And it turned out that, of course, I still had website clients. My clients still needed me, and I had still projects coming in, less than before, but still had lots. So I was very busy. I had plenty on my plate, and I was making money, and I saved a bunch of money. And then I realized, still getting clients in, still getting website projects in, I need some help. So I started hiring again, and I hired a couple of employees. There was Susan, who today was Susan's last day with us, which is sad. Susan's been fantastic. And I hired a couple of other employees as well, Amy and Gamu and Imran, and now we've just hired somebody else today, which you'll hear about. So TouchStreams as a website agency is still going. We're growing, but we're not, I'll give you the figures because, in hindsight, this is probably going to be really interesting. We, over the lifetime of TouchStreams, revenue has always increased from month to month. At the moment, our monthly revenue is sitting at about 120,000 Rand a month revenue. Keep in mind, this is for 6 employees. On average, we're earning 20,000 Rand a month. I'm earning a bit more than that, but not a lot more. And the rest of the team are, varying salaries. So we're not making a huge amount of money. We should be earning way more. And yet we're really good. Imran is great, and the rest of the developers are really great in their own ways. We've all got our strengths and our weaknesses, so not everyone's perfect. But we have the skills, we have the passion, and we care about our clients. We do good work. We do really, really good work. I think way better than a lot of other agencies. So what are we lacking? Am I charging too little? Are we taking too long to make the websites? My team will tell you that I do not let them take too long. In fact, I push them to do websites quicker and quicker, so that we can be profitable. Because, it's a long story, but we can be profitable, and we have been in the past, and we'll probably be profitable again very, very soon. But it's been so much work, man, since the start. Let me talk about what this has been like for me. It's been really hard, I have not had a traditional life, even since, you can go back any however far you want to go back and look at it. Like, I have not lived my life like most people at all. I was quite different at school already. I was the one guy who didn't drink any alcohol. So I'd go out to parties and go clubbing, but I still wouldn't drink any alcohol. That really made me stand out. And then I never really, Hilton and I, we never really had much money compared to the other guys at school. We went to a very, very wealthy, privileged school, and we were on scholarship. Otherwise, my parents could never have afforded it. And it was a fantastic school, and everyone else around us was incredibly wealthy relative to us, and they had so much money, and we never did, and that was fine. We never were too concerned about it. But then, we left school and went to university, and Hilton became an engineer, and he started earning quite well. I didn't, of course. After school, I took a gap year, and I worked as a river guide. Didn't earn a lot of money, but I really loved it. Working as a river guide was great. So many perks to being a river guide. What's funny, and this is a life lesson, I think. So many people said to me, excuse the blue light there, it's my computer. So many people would say to me when I was a river guide, "Oh, you have such a great job. Like, I wish I could do what you do as a river guide." And almost every single time I said, "But you can. You literally can." Whether it was somebody who was like a 16-year-old teenager who was like, "This is so cool," or whether it was like a 45-year-old or 55-year-old person, midlife, looking at me and going, "You're, a 20-year-old kid, but you've got such a great job. I wish I could do what you do." All of them could have done it. You didn't have to be particularly strong, particularly anything, to be a river guide. And yeah, that was a great year. Just excuse me for a moment. That was a great year. It was fun. I did websites when I wasn't up at the Orange River. I spent like half of the year up at the Orange River, and then the other half like in Cape Town, just, a lot of free time. And that was before I started my business. So I probably wasn't even making websites then. Oh, I made a wooden boat. Well, I refurbished a wooden boat in that year as well. That was one of my big projects. It was fun. Anyway, the point I was making was, that was my gap year. And then I started university, and I did computer science, as you might know, and 1 year of business science, with 1 year of a focus on computer science, and then focus on marketing for the rest of the years. And I didn't have much money as a student. Of course, I didn't have a job. I wasn't going to ask my parents for a whole lot of pocket money. They couldn't afford it, and that wouldn't be fair on them. So I didn't. I had, I'd go out partying and I'd have like 50 Rand on me if it was a good night. That like 10 or 20 Rand would get me into the club, or maybe 30 Rand. And then I had like 20 Rand left, and that was my night. Literally, I rarely ever spent more than 100 Rand in a night. Almost never. Like, that was a lot of money to me. So no, I wouldn't spend more than 100 Rand in a night going out. Which is crazy now that I live in London, and the prices of, you can't get into anything for less than a whole lot more than that. Anyway, and that was fine. I was always the guy who didn't have much money, and I didn't feel like I needed to spend on too much. And then I started my own business when I graduated university, and my business made me so little money. I was, earlier when I said that I was charging like 2,000 to 3,000 Rand for a website, I think the first couple might have even been less, like 1,500. Like, I was happy with a salary of like 2,000 Rand a month. If I made 2,000 Rand a month, I was living with my parents, of course, and I had pretty much no costs at the time. So 2,000 Rand a month was 2,000 Rand that I could spend, that I didn't have to spend on anything in particular. It was good. It was good. I don't remember what I spent it on. I think a lot of it was petrol, to be perfectly honest. Borrowing my parents' cars and then paying them back in petrol, or putting petrol in their cars. I think that's where most of my money went, actually. Yeah. Crazy times. And even now, my salary is, what I pay myself is, ridiculously small compared to industry rate. I to people who know, I tell them about it, or I give them an impression of what I pay myself. It's hilarious. It's a joke. My market rate in South Africa is probably about 2 to 2.5 times what I pay myself. Here in the UK, my market rate is probably between 3 and 4 times what my TouchStream salary is. Of course, it's not the same because that's in rands, and I'm talking about, in the UK. But like, I work part-time for the University of Cambridge, which is a really fantastic job, just part-time, and that pays me twice as much as my own business does. And that alone is way less, well, not way less, but quite a bit less than the industry average here. I mean, if I worked for a big firm here in the middle of London, I would be paid at least 50% more than the University of Cambridge pays me. Granted, the Cambridge work is way nicer and the team is fantastic, so I love that work. But the point is, that's how little I've been paying myself. And so I was telling you about how hard it's been. So that's the first thing. I've never had much money. Even now, if you ask any of my ex-girlfriends, they'll all tell you how stingy I've been with money. I'm sorry about that. It's kind of who I am, but it's also kind of a necessary protection because I've always had so little money, so I've needed to be careful with what I've had. And so that has made life difficult. When I look at how much money Hilton has always earned, I've always earned a smallish fraction of it. So that's tough. It doesn't matter how much he earns. I'm just using that as a sort of yardstick, so you get the idea of what I could be earning if I worked at any other company and put my full skills into practice at any other company. Right, that's the salary side of it. The other side is the time now, and stress. Now let's tackle stress first. I don't think I've ever really been stressed too much. I've always worked in such a way that I take quite a lot of breaks throughout the day. Like I would work for an hour and a half, and then I'd take a half-hour break or 45-minute break, and then I'd work and then I'd take a break. So, and then that would allow me to work much later in the day. So I'd work for a much longer period, but because I'm taking quite frequent breaks throughout the day. And I'd still work, like 8 hours a day, but it would be spread out over not 8 hours, but, from early morning to late night. And because I've spread things out and I've always loved the work I do, I've always loved making websites, and I like my business, and it's quite fulfilling. So apologies for that. So it's never felt particularly stressful, my work, TouchStream. So that's okay. I've never felt like I'm going to burn out. But what it has meant, as you've probably just gathered, is that my time has been kind of crazy, and it's been very hard and unfair on my girlfriends. that I've had over the last couple of years. And I'm sorry for that. I wish I had more time, or made more time. I mean, you could always say I should make more time, but in reality, like, doing what I do is so hard that I don't think I could do it if I wasn't spending as much time in my business. Well, a lot of good business people might say that I'm just doing things badly, or if I'm not making enough time for really good things in life and not stopping at a good time, then I'm just doing it badly. But I don't know about that. I mean, I always quit. You never know, right? You never know if you're actually doing a good job, or if you're, am I working smart? Am I working hard? Am I working both? I definitely working hard. Am I working smart? I think so. It's hard to tell. So could I be doing something different so that, could I restructure my current business such that it could be as successful as it is without me working as long hours as I do? I don't know. I wish it was. I try really hard to employ people that are good at what they do and have good personalities, positive personalities that work well together, that I can also just rely on, that I can ask them to do something and they do it, and sometimes they take their own initiative. That's great too. The more they take initiative, the more it takes off my shoulders. But no matter how hard I try to hire the best people, I still end up having so much work. Even the best people that I've hired, they're really good at what they do, but they're only good at that. Well, not that they're only good at that, but I can only really get them to do that. I've never had somebody who's been both like a really good developer and a really good designer, or a really good admin person and a good project manager, or a really good project manager and a good sales/marketing person. And I have to be really good at all of it. It's really hard. I've got to be a good enough developer that I can be the lead developer. I'm hoping one of my team members kind of steps up and becomes a lead developer, but that would mean that person would need to be good at all the different ways that we make websites. That alone is hard. So I have to be, I do that, I have to be good at all the different ways that we make websites so that I can check the work and I know what they've done. When my team has finished it, I can see if it's done properly. Because if it's not, then it's going to cause problems for us down the line. I need to be a good enough designer that I can give tips and ideas and inspiration for our designer, Claire. I have to be a salesperson. Firstly, I have to be a marketer. I have to be able to put the word out there, do great marketing strategies to let people know who we are and what we do and why they should work with us or hire us. And then I need to be a good salesperson to do great proposals, to have good meetings where I sell that. And I think that's one thing that I wouldn't say I'm a good salesperson, but we get almost every project that we do a proposal for. It's very rare that we do a proposal for a client who's interested in getting a website and we don't get the work. So either the proposals that we do are great, or when I meet people, that convinces them, or maybe both. Anyway, so I've got to do all of that. Then I've got to do the admin. I've always had, the last couple of years, I've always had somebody helping me with admin, but I've always got to know what's going on with the admin and the finances and the legal things and the HR things, recruiting, hiring, dismissing. Wow, and you've got to be really good at all of that, or you have to hire people who's good at all of that. And you can only hire people who are good at all of that if you're bringing enough money in that you can hire somebody to do that. Here's our predicament right now. We really need a good project manager. I have been trying to be a good project manager, and it is so hard. And working on the projects for PwC and the projects for ShopRite and the MMP Cambridge work, I've worked with a couple of fantastic project managers. Shout out to Nick in particular that we worked on that I worked with on the websites for Enrich at the MMP for Cambridge. What a fantastic project manager. He really showed me what it's like. Somebody who is with so many good things that I've realized a project manager needs to be. He's organized, he knows what's going on, and he keeps track of it. He is friendly, likable person who anyone can talk to. So he's approachable, he can literally talk to anyone and anyone's comfortable talking to him. He is both encouraging and positive, but firm. He doesn't let you get away with things. If you've promised something, then he'll follow up and he'll say, hey, did you do that thing? When are you going to do it by? And I think something that he didn't need to do with any of us, but I'm pretty sure he would be capable of, is showing his disapproval if we didn't, showing us what we should have done and why he's disappointed and what the consequences of that are going to be if we're slacking off. And then a project manager is so many things, and a project manager is great at communicating not just with the team and getting the team to be aligned and to know what they're doing and where they're going and when it needs to be done by and how it needs to be done, but also then communicating with the client and being a great not a salesperson, but a representative of the company as well, to go back to the client and say, hey, this is how the project's going. And what concerns do you have? And when there's issues, to be able to tackle those issues, to say, okay, what's the root cause of the issue? Let's figure it out as a team or together let's figure out what the root cause is and unblock the blockages, and resolve the problems. Or find the right person to resolve the problem, because the project manager themselves doesn't resolve the problem. But they find what the problem is and they find the right people to solve the problem. So project managing is incredibly, it's really difficult to do. For most people, I think most people can't do it. And the few people who can do it have mad skills to be able to be a great project manager. So that's what we really need. I've been trying my best to be a great project manager for my team, keeping them on track, letting them know what we're doing, when it's expected by, giving them encouragement, but also showing disapproval when they haven't been performing, all of that. So if Touchscreen is going to go anywhere, we need to have a project manager, but we can't really afford to hire a project manager, at least definitely not full-time, and maybe not even half-time. So maybe quarter time, like 2 hours a day. A really good project manager for 2 hours a day. But we also need more work to justify that. Well, right now we could maybe afford that, but to have a proper project manager for more time, we need more team members doing more projects. And then because our South African clients can't really afford more than we're charging, they really can't, at least the small businesses that we work for. We're going to either need to find much bigger clients in South Africa, or find UK businesses who can afford more so that we can actually afford to pay the team really good competitive rates. So that's where we are with TouchStreams. And it's been tough. It's been really tough. Right now I'm questioning if it's been all worth it. Has it been worth it? My goal, the reason I'm doing all of this in the first place, is because I've always wanted to have my own business, because I can take it a few steps back. When I was a kid growing up, my parents always used to take us camping to big nature reserves, game parks, what we would call game parks, like Kalahari or Kgalagadi and Etosha and Kruger and some of the other parks. And I was amazed, and I think all of me and Taryn and Hilton were all amazed at wild places. We love wild places. We loved wild animals, and the wilder the better. And I think we all had a desire to protect that. So Taryn became a nature conservationist, and I admire and respect her for that. And Hilton and I did, more businessy things. My goal there has always been, I want to help conserve wild areas in Africa, huge wild areas, like parks. It really makes me sad when I think about parks in certain countries, impoverished countries, that the parks have hardly any animals in them because they've been completely poached, because the people are so poor that there's no good economies, and they resort to poaching, but they wouldn't call it poaching. Maybe they're just hunting animals that are in the parks because they need the meat, because they're hungry and they're starving. It happens has happened in so many African countries, and that needs to change. This, the amount of land that is well protected in any continent, but I'm thinking about specifically Africa, that is wild and properly protected is a small percentage of the actual total land mass, and it should be much bigger. I mean, I personally think about, I go to Cape Town. Every time I climb up Table Mountain with my mom or with friends, and I'd look over the valley that is Cape Town, I'd imagine, what would this have been like thousands of years ago, before civilization really hit Cape Town? It would be a massive valley full of elephants and zebra and kudu and ostriches and cats, leopards, lions, cheetah on the plains. It would be so wild. It would just be bushveld. It would be fynbos as far as you can see. There'd be hills, there'd be some trees, and just wild animals, like at Cape Point, but even wilder with real predators. And it makes me so sad that so little land is still like that. And it needs to be protected. We can't let our wild places be destroyed and lose those wild animals. We can't let any more wild animals go extinct, and those places need to be conserved. It just needs to happen. It's right for us to look after natural things in this world. And I've always figured that's what I should do. That's what my life should be about. So when I was deciding what I wanted to do as a career around the end of high school, I had a very simple thought experiment, which was along the lines of, what could I do? What position could I be in that would give me the most ability to make the biggest positive change and conserve the most land, basically, for wild parks? Would it be something obvious, like being a president? Although I very quickly thought that it would be very, very hard for me as a privileged white guy to be the president of South Africa. I don't know how many people would support me. I think it would be definitely a very, very difficult, if not impossible thing. And besides, even if I was the president of the country, would I really be able to enact the kind of change I want to? I don't think so, to be perfectly honest. Because presidents have to do a lot of other things, looking after a lot of people, the whole country, the population of the country. South Africa has a lot of issues, and I'd be preoccupied with that. So no, I don't think being a president would be very helpful. And I don't know if I even could, even if I wanted to be. Then I thought, well, okay, what if I ran a massive nonprofit organization? One that came to mind, although I didn't really know it at the time, but I learned about it a little while later, was Peace Parks. They've done fantastic work looking after parks, but they mostly just conserve, I think, parks. They do restore parks to some degree, but they look after parks, big multinational parks, like Kruger, for example. And more recently, a couple of years ago, I learned about another organization that does something similar called the African Parks Organization. And the African Parks Organization is incredible, absolutely incredible. It's exactly what I want to do. Not mean that I want to be working for them necessarily, but I think that is the kind of thing that needs to happen. So that kind of organization is what they're doing. Their goal right now is 30 by 30, I think, which is looking after and restoring 30 national parks or protected areas like national parks by 2030, which is, a couple of years away, but like they've got a long way to go still to get to 30. They're on like 21 or 22 parks at the moment. And they're going to do it, I'm sure. I'm confident that they're going to get to 30 parks by 2030. But even then, 30 parks is a small amount of the parks. I once did some research because I've had many ideas of projects to do, personal projects to do over the years. And one of them was, I called it African Wild Parks. This was before I knew about the African Parks Organization. So AWP, African Wild Parks, and it was a website, and it was going to do some marketing for African parks. I think it was a great idea. I just didn't have the time and the energy, and I didn't have the resources to do it properly. And for that, I did a bunch of research, and I found out that there's actually somewhere between 500 and 1,000 national parks and equivalent wild areas and national, like parks in Africa. Between 500 and 1,000. That's incredible. And of course, African Parks Organization is doing fantastic work, absolutely fantastic work, but they're only going to get to maybe 30 parks by 2030. I'm not saying that they're not doing a good job. They're doing an incredible job, and the growth is incredible. What I'm saying is we need a lot more organizations like that, or they need to multiply their impact several times over, and their budget is absolutely enormous. To me, it's staggering, their budget, because of the amount of money that they bring in through donations. It's incredible, but it needs to be doubled, tripled, 10 times to conserve a lot of, or a big chunk of, the African wild areas. So I need to either start an organization like that, which I think would be very hard, but totally doable. But I say doable only I would need to be in the right place at the right time, knowing the right things. And I don't know how I would start something like that, because you can't just start an organization that conserves, apologies for the noise outside, that conserves wildlands, because their model is effectively work with governments, make massive long agreements with governments to look after and take over the parks. So they'll sign agreements with governments for like 50 years to look after their parks. The country gets a portion of the revenue that the tourism, that the park brings in, and African Parks gets the rest of the money, and they use that money to, they put the money straight back into the park, but essentially they get a lot of donor funding, and they use their funds to restore the park. So they reintroduce animals, they massively overhaul the security around the park, with rangers and wardens and fences, and fences aren't always good, but like the way that they do it, they look after, they protect what's there, and then they restore the land, and then they reintroduce animals, and then and this is brilliant, they bring in the communities outside the parks, and they get them to be involved in the parks. So the communities around help with the tourism, they help with they just help with the park, they help looking after it. There's sometimes farming involved, and teaching involved, and security, being rangers. There's looking after the camps and the shops and the lodges, and there's just so much that needs to be done around these parks, and they bring in the local communities, and they make sure that the communities realize the benefit of African Parks being there looking after the park, the benefit that they get from the tourism and everything that happens because of it. That's such a great model. But where do you can't just start something like that. You can't just start speaking to a government. It's impossible. You need to start somewhere else. So I don't know where I would start if I was going to start an organization like that, but maybe I'll figure it out. The other possibility, and this is what my thinking was, is to start a business that can fund that can make that happen. I imagined, so going back to my thought experiment, my third option after being a president, starting a massive non-profit organization that conserves. Option 3, starting a massive business, or being the owner of a massive business that makes so much money that it can fund that kind of thing. The next, not the next, but a company like Apple, or Google has so much money, they could just put a fraction, if they wanted to, if it was in their, if their shareholders agreed to it, they could give a fraction of their earnings, their revenue, their, cash to fund parks. I'm not saying that's the best model. I don't want to be like, Amazon, or be like Apple, as consumerist as they may be. And they are quite consumerist, and they're not necessarily good companies for the world as a whole. But if I was the owner of such a massive multinational company, I would have that kind of power. So I figured of all those options, the one that was most within my reach that I could start straight away was starting my own business. So that's why I started my own business. That's why I started Touch Dreams. To get into a position one day where I can either fund those kind of organizations, or start one of those organizations with the connections and the money and everything else that I would maybe have from having a massively successful, globally spanning business. So that's what I need to create. So there's one more part to this. One more idea, which is, so I've told you that I'm considering, what is the future of Touch Dreams? Is it worth me continuing it as a website agency? Because it takes so much time and effort, and it's growing, but it's growing so slowly, and I need something that's massive, a global business. I I don't know how long it's going to take to get TouchStreams to get to that point, and if I can make it get to that point before I retire. Well, I still have time to do what I want to do. And I know I'm jumping around a bit, but I want to just go back to one other point. Something that Georgie always said to me and asked me, and I think it's a valid question, and it's a very important question to answer, which is, well, why don't I just join African Parks? Why don't I just join African Parks, but make it better? That's a very valid question, and I think the question that you probably had, you're probably wondering the same thing, and most people do ask me that, and the answer is pretty simple. What position could I move into that would have that where I could have the biggest impact on what they do? Let's say, for argument's sake, it's the CEO role, right? I'm the head of the operations, I'm the head of the business effectively. I'm the head of the organization that runs it on the ground, the CEO, or even on the board. But let's just, for argument's sake, say the CEO. Even if I was a fantastic CEO and I really cared about what they do, and I did a great job, how much better as a CEO could I be than their current CEO, which is Peter Fernhead, I think his name is? How much better of a CEO could I possibly be? Not like right now, but maybe in a couple of years. How much better could I be? I don't know. Maybe a little bit better. Could I make the African Parks organization twice as good as it is now by myself as in any position? I don't think so. I don't think I can make it twice as good as it is now, let alone 3 times or 5 times or 10 times bigger than it is now. And that's what I want. I want to at least strive for it. So I figure even in the most effective position I could be in that organization, it would feel good. I would love to be working for them. I would absolutely love to work for them. Even in the most powerful position I could be in, I don't think I could make a huge difference that would double the size of the organization. I think that would be nearly impossible. Maybe I could make it a bit better, a bit bigger, have a bit more reach. That's not what I want. I want it would be better to have another partner organization that was as big as it, or be able to donate so much money to it that I could double what it does. I mean, the amount of money is staggering, but the only way I think I'm going to get there is having a massive business. So that's what I want to do. And besides, I've loved what I've done so far. I've loved TouchStreams. I've loved making websites. I've always loved making websites, and I think I always will. So it's not like I've been doing what I do purely for the money. I've actually really enjoyed it, and I've always cared about our clients, and I think our clients know. So the last part that I was going to talk about is, so what's next? Where can I go from here? There's 2 options I see. Apart from keeping going with the TouchStreams as a website agency, so that's option 1, just keep going with TouchStreams as a website agency. See where it goes, see how far I can grow it. Option 2 is to not do that, but to transition into Team Knowledge sites again, or Team Knowledge projects. And let's talk a little bit more about it. What would that look like? Well, firstly, people ask me, what is that company, how would it make money? Like, what sort of company is it? I see it as a sort of consultancy, kind of like the bigger management consultancies like Bain & Co. and McKinsey. Not like them in terms of ethics, but like them in terms of a business model where effectively we're selling people's time or their expertise, but leveraged. It's not just hourly rate. It's incredibly smart people going out into massive companies, or no, maybe not even massive companies, just an uncountable number of companies, going into them and being agents who are experts at interviewing people and documenting that knowledge and putting it into systems that capture that knowledge for our business clients. And so in that way, it's like, because the power of the business is in the individuals who are doing that work. It's not in software, it's not a service. It's not like a software service. It's not a product like a physical product we're selling. It's really a service, a digital service of skills. And that's what makes it both not as scalable, because, if you're selling products, it can be much more scalable. It's not as scalable as a product-based business, because you're effectively selling time. But it's also much harder. Barriers to entry are much higher. So if we were to succeed, it would be much harder for any other company to try to duplicate what we do. And also, I don't think any other businesses are doing anything like this, apart from that one other company that we found in Australia that was doing something similar. But apart from them, we never came across any other businesses that are doing anything like this. And I still think it's absolutely critically needed, because most businesses do need to capture their knowledge in a good way, and they're really, really bad at it. Pretty much every business I've ever come across. So I think there's a big opportunity there. The question is, do I want to do that? Do I want to start a business that is going to become like a consultancy, kind of like those management consultancies? And the big concern on my mind is, what kind of clients would we have? If we're just going to be helping companies that are not making the world better, if we're going to be helping the Cokes and the Procter and Gambles and the McDonald's of the world, that have or certain shady banks, or any businesses, or maybe any businesses that are just big corporations that make a huge amount of money but are not good for the world. I don't really want to be helping those kinds of businesses. And they might be the ones who are willing to pay the most and would maybe want this the most, potentially. So we might end up having to say no, or maybe I wouldn't even have the power to say no at that point, because we'd have a board of directors and maybe other owners, part owners. And I wouldn't be able to, veto who we say no to. If a big bank or a big fossil fuel company wants to offer us a ridiculous amount of money to capture all of their team knowledge, millions of rands, or millions of pounds, or millions of dollars to have my expert team go in and capture their business knowledge, would I be able to say no? That's maybe the end conclusion of this business. We'd have massive clients like that, and we'd have to make decisions. Are we going to say yes or no to that? Okay, so that's TouchStream's team knowledge. That's where it could go. I think there's huge potential for there, and we would need to prove it, and I need to know if that's something I really want to do. The last option is, it's kind of a fun one, and it's something I've been thinking about quite a bit. It's a personal project, a pet project. Very few people know about it. I've shown it to a few people. I think there's some potential here, but I don't know. I don't know I don't know how good the business case of it is. I've been calling it Biomap up to now, but I've also have another name on my mind called Worldly. It's essentially a mapping software, but it's not software so much as it's a mapping platform. And what it allows you to do is very, very easily, with just a couple of clicks, you look at a base layer, and by that I mean like you're looking at, think Google Maps, Google Earth. You're looking at a piece of land, and or a country or a continent or the globe, and you can add layers very quick and easily to it. So let's say, for example, you wanted to see a layer of the weather patterns, like where the world has had rain recently, or maybe historically. So you want to see like historic rainfall over the last 10 years as one layer on this map. And then the second layer, you want it to be like invasive species of plants or something. Or maybe it's more business focused. So imagine maybe it's winds. So you want one layer of wind strengths and wind directions over the span of the last year. And then you want another layer of flights or flight paths. Where do the major airlines fly relative to the winds? And the idea is you're going to have the base layer, and you can very easily add layers to it. And then you can group layers, and you can color the layers. And so you can see any data, geographic data relative to any other geographic data quite quickly and easily. Now, I've to a few people that I've talked to about this, they've said, well, firstly, isn't that like what Google Earth does, or I think it's called Google Earth, or GIS software? Isn't that what GIS software does? Yeah, it is. But they require an incredible amount of knowledge to use. They're so complicated, and most of them are like desktop software you got to install, and even the browser-based ones are really complex, and they're really like deeply scientific tools, right? That researchers will use, and very experienced, skilled people will use. What I'm proposing is not that. It's something that anyone at any time, when they have a question, a geographic related question, they can, with a couple of clicks, use this. Now, you might say, okay, cool, you got this idea, but like, firstly, how are you going to do that? I already have a working prototype and it works quite well. At the moment, the base layers come from OpenLayers, so it's a free mapping service, which is really nice. And then I've got one or two services that I hook into. The first and main service that I'm hooking into is iNaturalist. So it fetches data from iNaturalist, which is basically observations of plants and animals by citizen scientists. In other words, general people, people who are interested in spotting animals and spotting plants. It includes researchers and biologists and conservationists and that kind of thing. They've all put their observations into iNaturalist, and iNaturalist provides a public API. And an API stands for, doesn't matter what it stands for, it's technical. It's essentially like, think of it as the language the two websites can speak. So my app, my website/app, Worldly or Biomap, it wants to get the data. So it uses the iNaturalist API, and it speaks through the API to the iNaturalist API, which is kind of like the communication, the middleman, and it uses the API of iNaturalist to get the data, and it displays it on a map. And the demo works right now. You can add it's a little bit more, there's a few more options. You can choose the color of, so let's say, for example, you wanted to see proteas, the dots of where proteas have been seen in the last year in South Africa as red dots. You can do that. You can add the layer, you choose the color, and you can have multiple layers. You can see like proteas relative to, like zebras. And those two layers the dots can be different colors. And it's not just dots, you can do heat maps and a couple of other different types of layers to represent that data. So essentially, this platform, this app, will fetch data from other services that make their data available through public APIs. Or, there's paid for APIs. There's most of them. Like, for example, like geographic data, or not geographic, but meteorological data, or business related data, like up-to-date flight plans and shipping paths, and, couriers, where they're not, you won't see real-time data of couriers, because that would be insecure, but there's a lot of providers of this sort of data that is also paid for. So then I would need to provide that as, to be able to add certain layers. Certain layers will be charged because because they're not free to get the data. The point is, I've got a working prototype of it. And I think it's pretty amazing because I haven't found anything else quite like that, where you can select which types of layers you want and easily have them as like layers, like in a little layers panel, almost like Photoshop has layers, and you can rearrange the layers, and each layer is effectively a different color, so you can see one thing relative to something else on a map easily. And so you might say, who would use this? And I can think of a lot of use cases, a lot of different groups who would like this. Researchers, firstly. Not necessarily, and I did earlier speak about how like GIS software was often used in academia and researchers, and they will still use that when they want to get really technical with their data. They're going to use that kind of software. But as a first pass, as an introductory, explanatory software, it'd be really nice for them, and they would love to, I'm sure, be able to do this quite quickly, to say, okay, I've got this idea, I want to just validate it. Let me just add this data from iNaturalist and this data from this meteorological thing and see it on a map and see, does this make sense as something to study, to research? And then they can use more complicated software to go deeper. So academics, researchers, conservationists, to see perhaps poaching levels versus invasive species versus natural, endemic species on maps, and how they're moving over time and things like that. It could be used, and then it could be used in business a lot too. So imagine you are in charge of logistics at a company that has a lot of logistics, and you have your current, your drivers, or your shipping companies that ship your products around, and you want to optimize it, but you've got some sort of idea that you want to validate. Like, what if we went through a different corridor, went through a different route, or our drivers all of a sudden, went from city to city instead of just within a city, and you wanted to validate that? You could do that with a couple of clicks here, potentially, if the data layers that you wanted were in this map. So it allows, academia, businesses, general public even, who are just interested in seeing something. Like, imagine the Russia-Ukraine crisis war has just started, and you want to see the front lines. You've just heard the stories on CNN and Al Jazeera, and you want to see where are the battle lines. Where is Russia encroaching into Ukraine? Of course, there are websites that provide that, really, really great websites that already provide that in a lot of detail. But imagine that people knew about the service and they knew that they could just go to Worlderly and click add the current affairs, current conflicts mapping group, and then within that, click on Ukraine, click on Russia, and it would show you not necessarily real time. It's not like this is going to be research grade data, but the general public could see things that they're hearing about in the news quite quickly with a couple of clicks. Even something, and think about the crises that are coming up in the world. Massive viruses and that kind of thing, and their spread. Climate change related things like water levels and desertification, things that are related to climate change that you want to see on a map. What about things like water? Fresh water is over the next century is going to become a big deal, a big issue in many parts of the world. A lot of people are going to want to know where the water is and where they can get it from, and other questions like that. There's going to be, the general public would want to use this as well to see things on a map if they knew about it with a couple of clicks that they couldn't otherwise. I don't know of any service like this, and I can see a huge number of use cases both in business and outside of business, and businesses are probably going to be willing to pay for it for certain layers and certain privileges, like saving their, they create a map of a bunch of different layers. And they're like, that's what I want to see. They can save that in their library, and that kind of thing can be paid for, can be charged. So basic services, like you can add one layer, could be free, and multiple layers, business use cases would then be charged for to get that level of access. You could probably tell it's really exciting to me. I love mapping software. I find it so much fun to work with. I've ever since I first worked on CasaBio, which is a whole story on its own. CasaBio was a massive learning experience, and that actually CasaBio fed a lot into this idea, because it was a lot of mapping and it was a lot of species, and it was like, where were things seen? It was kind of in a way a precursor to iNaturalist. That's how I'm going to describe it. And I learned a lot doing CasaBio, and I started to fall in love with mapping software. I was using OpenLayers software, but there's other ones as well, like Leaflet and some other libraries. And mapping software is amazing. And the applications of it are incredible, and it'd be so much fun to build that. And I think so. One of the other things is, I talked about what would be the impact of Team Knowledge if it became a global company, and we had, at the end, what's the end game? What does it look like? Is it good for the world, or is it bad for the world? And it's hard to tell, but it could be bad on the whole if we were doing Team Knowledge capture for companies that were not doing good in the world. I mean, obviously we'd have some choice, but it's not necessarily the case that it'll be good. But I can only see good things coming out of Worlderly. I mean, not only, I can see bad actors using it, bad people, but for the most part, I think it would be so helpful for so many people, for so many causes, to be able to have a piece of software like this. And I don't know of one that exists. I would love to make it. I don't know if it would end up with the type of business as big as I want, as big as I need it to be, but maybe it could. This kind of thing, when people start a project like this, 9 times out of 10, when they make a lot of money out of it, or they get a lot of leverage out of it that they can use for other things in their life, it's because they've sold out, because they made something incredible that a big company bought. And that is an option. So maybe we build this Worlderly thing, get a team, we build it, maybe we get funding, we build it, and it becomes hugely successful, and then we sell it to a company like Google. We sell it to a company that needs it for their logistics. Ideally not a company that's, is not doing necessarily good for the world, but a company there's lots of companies that do amazing things that would need this kind of software. And so maybe a company buys it, and that makes me a lot of money. And then maybe from there I move into the space of environmental conservation and that kind of thing. So those are my ideas. When do I do them? Do I keep going with TouchStreams as an agency, as a website agency? I will for the short term, but how long is that short term, and when's the medium term and the long term? At what point does it make sense to either transition slowly out of it, like I was trying to do with Team Knowledge? Not that I was trying to drop off the websites, but I was trying to ramp up the Team Knowledge like that, and do one of these two projects on the side? Or do I just let TouchStreams websites go and start one of these two projects from scratch? If I do go the map route, the Worldly, I could retain my team potentially, and hire them in the Worldly thing. But then I have two options to get there. Either I do it on the side by myself to start off with, and when it gets a little bit of traction, then I can get some then I can basically bring them in as it starts to get traction. Or I could just try to get funding, like investment in it. I don't know. And the problem is, with both of these, I really need to validate them properly. I really need to both Team Knowledge, but that's harder, maybe, and this mapping software. I need to speak to people who would actually be willing to pay for it and show them what it could do. Not sell it to them, but sell them the vision, sell them the idea of what they could be, what they could have if this was a real thing. Both the Team Knowledge business and the mapping platform business. Validate it properly the way that the book that I really, really want to read now, which I've forgotten what it's called. It's like the Mom Test, something like that. And it's about not asking friends and family their opinions, but it's about actually validating ideas in the real world with people who will be willing to pay. And using methods that would show if they would actually pay if it was a real product now. I really want to read that book. Can't wait to. I think I need to read that book and then decide what I'm going to do with one of these two businesses. Am I going to jump in with them, and how am I going to do them? On the side, or jump in with both feet after stopping TouchStreams websites? We'll see. Maybe that'll be a part 2. This has been long. I hope it's been interesting and informative, and I hope I see you all again soon, whoever is watching. All right, bye for now.